Today I fucked up by helping my father dig up the backyard. Obligatory, this happened about 2 years ago. I rented a backhoe for the weekend to do some work and my dad asked me to bring it by because he wanted a drainage trench dug. I got there and dug the trench without issue, but my dad suddenly had another idea. He explained to me that back in the 70s when he first built the house he had buried a lead-lined cooler in the backyard, and he was concerned about the lead contamination. I asked him where the cooler was and he pointed to a general area of the yard. I began digging holes throughout his search zone without luck. After about an hour of digging what seemed to be random holes, jackpot. The backhoe found the cooler and busted it into pieces. Another thing my father neglected to mention to me was that this was during his hobbyist taxidermy phase. It turned out that one weekend the power went out and the freezer he had unprepared deer hides in thawed out. His thinking was to put the deer hides in a cooler and bury it in the backyard to dispose of the deer hides. Fast forward to 45 years and the cooler that contained deer hides now contained a rancid liquid that sat in wait for an unsuspecting person to dig up years later. When the liquid oozed out, this heavy overpowering putrid smell of death, worse than a bloated whale covered in chicken shit and rotten eggs, began to overtake my senses. I gagged, my dad gagged, and I decided I'd had enough and was out of there. I put the backhoe on the trailer and left. The liquefied deer carcass was covering the backhoe's bucket and followed me home. From the driveway the smell began to flow into my house and soon enough my neighbor was outside asking if something died on my property. I explained what happened and hosed the backhoe off. The next morning I headed back over to my parents' house. I was at least a 1/4 mile away and the pungent smell of death began to enter my nostrils. The closer I got to my parents, the stronger the smell. Overhead, at least a dozen turkey vultures were circling my parents' property. By the time I got to their house I couldn't breathe. The stench was so bad. I ran into the house to find my mother waiting for me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" my mother yells at me. She began flipping out on me since I was the one operating the backhoe and broke open the time bomb. She hadn't slept all night and the neighbors all around were pissed. She then told me that the local police had paid a visit out of concern expressed by the neighbors. I promised from that moment on I would not entertain any of my dad's dimwit ideas. The smell took 3 days to disappear from the neighborhood and another 2 days after that to disappear from my parents' property. TLDR, took a backhoe to my parents' house, dug up a 45-year-old cooler with liquefied deer carcasses in it, and made an entire neighborhood smell like death for days. On the bright side, you spent quality time with the old man, and have a family story to pass on to the kids about you and grandpa. Priceless. Grimacing face. Father-in-law buried a packed full 20 cubic feet meat freezer somewhere on his property with an excavator after the power went out while they were out of town. The land has been sold off and it's now starting to be developed. I wonder who will find the time capsule of death. I can't imagine how awful it smells, but from your description it was quite disgusting. Came here because the title would lead to a dead body. Pleasantly pleased it was almost there. Oh, nothing to worry about, son. That's just an old deer carcass. Yay, that's it. Why didn't you just bury it again? Today I fucked up by enlisting my best friend to find the mystery smell in my basement. Today I fucked up. Obligatory, this didn't happen today, but yesterday. So yesterday I had some virtual work training to do, thanks COVID, and so did my best friend. So we decided to conduct our virtual training together while getting some things done around my house. I had a smell in the basement that I just couldn't seem to put my finger on. It was pretty rank, so I asked him to lend a nose to help me find it during the downtime throughout the day. So we started out sniffing around. I cleaned the litter boxes out really well. No unusual stink there. He pulled out all of the boxes that store the Christmas ornaments, etc. in case one of the cat's meals had escaped and then perished. Oh, nothing hidden. We pulled out the washer hose, scrubbed the utility sink, pulled apart the shelves, even opened up the access in the bottom of the chimney and stuck hands and flashlights up there to try to find something. We tried everything, and still nothing. Still stinky, but after a full clean of the basement, we just couldn't figure it out. The only place we hadn't looked was the sump in the corner of the basement. So I pulled on a pair of work gloves, and yanked up the top. ready to find all manner of things. But that was a letdown too. It was dry as a bone and still as clean as a drain in your basement can be. But the smell was there, and getting stronger. Now let me explain the smell. Picture belly button lint left to fester for 50 years in a fat man's navel. Picture that cave of bat guano that David Attenborough spoke about in Planet Earth. Picture Satan's prolapsed asshole. Those descriptions don't really scratch the surface of that odor. While pondering our life decisions that brought us to that point, he likely regretting that the army ever introduced us, and me wondering who the hell puts a gaping hole in the basement anyway. My bestie shifts, and bumps into the hose that leads from the sump pump to the outside of the house. It's full of liquid. That's sod. So being a nice fellow, he lets me know and we proceed to try to flush it out. No dice. Looks like we'll have to pull the hose. Being a taller lad, he grabs the top and gives it a good yank while I collect a bucket to drain the water into. What happened next is almost beyond words. When the hose let loose from the side of the house, out poured the most noxious, hellish stench I have ever had the misfortune of smelling. But not only a stench came forth, but also a gush of blackish sludge. Cue intense dry heaving from both unwitting humans and a scattering of the two cats who had been watching us with somewhat amused indifference. Being that he is holding a hose full of God only knows what, he can't flee as the cats have done. Being a good friend, I can't flee either, leaving my comrade to deal with that particular perfumey soup. So we devise a plan in between the heaves that are still occurring. We'll hold the hose/bucket/pump, and sprint for the door. So we do. We run like Usain Bolt. But as we do so, the hose is flicking its particular form of bilge water onto us. It's like a fucking color run, but instead of colored powder, we are being showered in wastewater and broken dreams. In a black spray of what can only be described accurately as putrefaction, we make it outside, now stinking in a way that is indescribable. I won't even try. So we get the hose disconnected, still retching, and take the garden hose to flush the demons from its depths. And what comes next may be the most disgusting thing I have ever encountered. The congealed remains of what likely amounted to dozens of mice came barreling out of the end of the hose. Mouse shards, bone, fur, and liquefied guts spilled onto the lawn. Screw never leaving your comrade, we both bolted. After much airing out, we pitched the hose, that shit went straight into the trash, and no, I don't even feel guilty about not recycling that. After what that hose had seen, it could never be resurrected into a poor unknowing consumer plastic good. It was a goner. For the rest of the day you could still smell us, even after showering. When we went for a run later, the stench re-emerged, oozing out of our pores. So here I sit, writing this to you, and still surreptitiously sniffing myself and my surroundings, catching phantom whiffs of the odor mouse that will never leave me. In the end though, I still have my friend, surprisingly, and now have to fill a hole in the side of my house with a new hose, one with a cap or something that the mice won't get into and then drown in a soup of their deceased relatives. Some things can't be unseen or unsmelled in this case. Too long didn't read. Bestie and I tried to find a raunchy smell in my basement and I covered us both in liquefied mouse carcasses. Odor mouse, ew. But good on you for having that friend, he really stuck by you. Mouse moose, you have a true friend. In life and in icky, gooey in death. Drown in a soup of their deceased relatives. Thank you for that eloquent description. Today I fucked up by eating breakfast while reading this. I've smelled the same smell. My mom had a little ornamental pond in their backyard. It was a plastic tub buried in the ground. For the winter mom emptied it and covered it with a plank of plywood. Come spring, and warming sun melt the snow away. Horrible stench took over the backyard. I happened to be visiting when mom decided to remove the plywood. In the tub there was a sun-warmed soup of rotting mice and frogs, who had probably thought the tub was a nice cave for winter, but the sides were slippery and they couldn't get out. We buried the poor animals while retching and threw the pond away so no innocent animals ever get trapped again. I know this smell. I know it too well. You may need to call a professional cleaning company to come out and use an ozone generator to remove that smell if it doesn't go away soon. Today I fucked up by slicing my clit open while shaving my vag for the first time since March. There I, 19F, was chilling in the shower after getting in from my shift at work. I had decided that now was the time to finally say goodbye to the bush. I was all primed and ready to go, but I guess I'm a little rusty because I cut myself while shaving from the top. I left it unfinished and figured I would come back to it later. I went to shave the lips. All was going well. Then I felt it. I didn't feel any pain at first, but I saw the blood. Oh boy, did I see the blood. I was dripping violently, frantically rubbed away at the shaving gel to see what was wrong. Then the pain hit, and it was not pretty. I was so scared. Like, what have I done? What have I freaking done? It was like a never-ending orgasm except 10 times more intense, painful. My blood was splattering the bath. I didn't know what to do, so I screamed. My dad came rushing in to ask what was wrong. I stood there shaking. The blood was everywhere. I think my dad assumed it was just a really bad period. I had to tell him that I cut my clit and that he needed to get me to the hospital ASAP. Long story short, we got to the hospital. They patched me up and sent me on my way. Not gonna lie, this was one of the scariest experiences of my life. I was terrified that my clit was fucked beyond repair. Luckily it wasn't. Too long didn't read. I tried shaving my kitten for the first time in a while. I ended up cutting my clit and making a mess. My dad rushed to ask what was wrong and found me standing in the shower with my half-shaven pussy. There was blood fricking everywhere and the pain was excruciating. Dad thought I was on my period, so I had to explain that I had cut my clit and that he needed to get me to hospital, otherwise I could lose it. I'm out of A&E now, and I am glad to report that my clit will live to fight another day. Buy yourself a trimmer. Trim everything short and then take out the razor. That way you can see what you're doing. Ouch. When I read she wiped away shaving foam, I cringed. Lol, I never use shave foam near the important bits for fear of slipping. I had literal chills while reading this. Your poor dad, probably traumatized. I know. Crying face. I had to get to the hospital somehow though. 50 Blades of Grey, a story of a slit clit. Glad you are okay and clit is still attached. Maybe waxing or a depilatory next time, lol. I hope you have a speedy recovery. Poor dad. Poor dad indeed. I probably scarred him for life, lol. Necessary sacrifice for the sake of my clit though. Ha ha ha. Although not the same, I had a similar reaction to a time when I was like 5. I had been staying over with my grandparents and I watched my grandpa shave. Thinking it was cool, I went to the bathroom early in the morning and started to pretend to shave my face. I got the razor stuck on the skin right underneath my Adam's apple and, in a panic upon feeling a sudden prick, yank it away from myself. Suddenly my neck started bleeding and I began to scream. I literally thought I had just sliced open my neck and that I was going to bleed to death. I had a band-aid on my Adam's apple for like 2 days and I was fine. My grandpa didn't let it go for quite some time though, haha.